Hey, what's up, and welcome back to the Relationship Schools podcast. I'm your host, Jason Gaddis, and I'm stoked to be here with you on this ride called life. And as we drill down into relationships, one of the most fundamental parts of our life and the most fulfilling parts of our life is our human interactions and connections. So this podcast is designed to help you with that part of your life. I think it's really one of the hubs of the wheel for a well-lived life. And wellness in your mind, in your body. Like, man, when your relationships are good or your primary relationship is good, I don't know about you, but I can accomplish more. I can tackle just about anything because I got my woman here at my side cheering me on. It's huge. All right. In this episode, man, I'm really psyched. I got to interview Annie Brook. Annie Brook is kind of a baby whisperer, if you will. I've heard people call her that. I've actually seen her do baby whispering. It's pretty phenomenal. And we're going to talk about infant attachment as well as adult attachment in this podcast interview. And she just has a real gift with reading bodies, working with infants' bodies. Like, it's just fascinating to watch the work that she can do with people. She's a bit of an elder here in the Colorado area, and man, so many people I know have been served by her, have worked with her, and had some major shifts in their families, their children, in their marriages. So she's got some really, really cool skills. I mean, just to give you a sense, you know, she told me in this interview that she was the first person to, I think, start a somatic psychology program in the United States. Yeah, it's just like, whoa. She's got a PhD in perinatal and somatic psychology, human sexuality and development. She's got a dual MA in family systems therapy and organizational development, a BA in somatic psychology. She's a registered somatic movement educator, a certified body-mind centering instructor, certified body-mind psychotherapist, tantra instructor, biodynamic cranial sacral therapist. I mean, on and on. I've had sessions with this woman. My kids have had sessions with this woman. And it's just cool. I took a class with her on infant development and attachment in grad school. It was like a 2-day workshop, and I was blown away. I talk about it a little bit in this interview. So we get into lots of cool terrain. We talk about how Annie got on the path of personal growth and working with people. I always love hearing people's stories about that. We talked about infants, infant depression, infant attachment. We talked about her practice of engaged somatics. We talked about her satisfaction cycle that she teaches infants and adults. It's really cool. It's like 5 steps, so you're going to want to take notes there. We talked about conflict in couples. We talked about co-regulation, tantric work, polyamory and open relationships. Man, we covered a lot of ground. Okay. So I think you're going to dig this. And Annie is a real treat. She's a joy to be with, to be around. And I think you're going to like this one a lot. So enjoy. Stay tuned to the end for your action step. All right. Welcome to the show, Annie Brook.
Hi, Jason. How are you?
I'm doing well. Good to see you.
Good. Yeah, I'm delighted to be here. I just love the work you're doing and believe so much in relationships that work for families.
Cool. Yeah. Well, You've been an influential part of my life, so I thought it would be fun to have you here and share your wisdom and work with people.
Yeah, I'm glad to.
Yeah. So
I remember, what do you want to know?
Well, I have so many questions, but I want to have the listeners kind of get to know you a little bit. Can you give us a sense of how you describe yourself now? Because you've trained in so many different modalities over so many years, and you have such a breadth of experience. So, like, how do you describe yourself now? And then we're going to talk into kind of how you got into that, and then we'll talk about attachment and so forth.
Okay, that sounds great. Well, now I would describe myself as a somatic psychologist, meaning that I do psychotherapy and coaching. Some of it's online. A lot of my sessions are in person, and I also train therapists because it's really the body-centered material that has to integrate with our psyche and our sense of self. So I have a clinic in Gun Barrel, Colorado, which is right outside Boulder, and I treat infants to adults, families, couples, and sometimes I'm brought in to treat help groups with communication.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, and I've actually had sessions with you, both individually, and I think we had a water session. Was it a Watsu session with my son?
We did. A warm pool session.
Yeah, that was super cool. And then I took an attachment kind of weekend class from you at Naropa many years ago where I watched you kind of help a baby repattern its movements after it had kind of a complicated birth, which was fascinating to watch it change in the moment.
It's so rewarding. You see the children, the infants repattern, and then the relationship with the parent changes.
Yeah.
Because sometimes a baby can create an insecure attachment. The parents can be fine, but if the baby is still under shock or trauma left over from the birth, it can set up a difficult attachment dynamic right there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I remember I was in tears watching this because my own birth stuff, I think, got activated. But to see the way in which you were holding this baby, but also challenging it to make a certain movement, like by pushing on its foot, it was really incredible to watch.
Yeah, it's, when we start listening to the body and working with because our body will store all the experiences and we'll have patterns of protection happen. So if a baby's not pushing through all the way in order to reach for connection, it's not going to be as, I don't know if the word is capable, but it's going to struggle more.
Yeah.
So we just want to really find the health and in the system and help everybody to thrive.
Yeah.
I once worked with a 6-week-old on attachment, and she had a C-section birth. And within 20 minutes, this infant, she wasn't attaching to her mom. She was attached to her dad, but she would look around and be precocious, but not settle into her mom's body. And by her going back through the birth story with some coaching, I was helping the mother name the experiences of the C-section. Like she would say, "Oh, I did go away." And because the little girl got really mad.
Mm.
And once the mother could not feel guilty, because we always want to say birth is not a problem, it's just what happened.
Uh-huh.
And if you can go back and heal that story with the little ones, it so relieves the attachment dynamic. And so this little girl was furious. And once mom could say, "I did go away and you got mad and I'm not going away again," the child then could go from anger to the sadness. And then the mother could say, "Oh, I missed you too, honey." And so then they could have that moment of sadness. And then the infant went into real fear, quivering lip and just this terror. And the mom could say, "Oh, and when I was gone, you got scared."
Yeah.
"Oh my gosh. And I am not going away again." And the baby just took a big breath and settled into her mom's chest and just totally relaxed.
So amazing.
It's so amazing. Yeah. I'm always in awe of the intelligence in our own system.
Well, and the intelligence of babies and what they comprehend and understand, right? This is
absolutely
kind of new. I mean, 50 years ago, it was kind of assumed that babies didn't have the ability to do this, right? It was just like, oh, they're just crying because they want food.
Yeah, it was assumed that babies really didn't have a kind of awareness or even feeling. Like they would use no anesthesia sometimes with early infant procedures.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Annie, I want to keep diving in, but I want to back up just a step and say, how did you get into this?
Yeah.
Like, how did you become a somatic psychologist, baby whisperer, like attachment expert? Like how did that all go down?
I'd say it happened out of my own stress. In my early 20s, I was in a relationship. We bought land in Maine, built a house, started a water-powered furniture mill. And all of a sudden, without me understanding, my partner started drinking. I had no idea really I could see the behavior change because he was under stress with our mill business. And I didn't know what to do. And then the house burned down when I was visiting my parents trying to figure this out. And I came back to a big pile of gray ashes and, so much shock and trauma. Because it was really that, we start out with so much hope in our early years, the hope for relationship, and we dive into making home and family. And that's what I did. And all I knew to do was, I'm not happy. What's wrong with this picture? And then with that kind of shock and loss, we built another house. And it wasn't for another year before I really woke up and thought, I'm dying here. This is not going to work. And it was really because of the isolation and the lack of skills. I didn't have any skills, and my partner didn't either. And finally, I ended up, when I got a job on a fishing boat, and I worked off Cape Cod, and I had a fall, about a 17-foot fall from the wharf when I arrived home from fishing exhausted, and I was selling the lobsters up on the wharf. And I got to the top of the ladder. And have you ever had a time in your life, Jason, where you worried so much you couldn't think?
Probably.
It's, if you've had real deep trauma or loss, that can happen.
Okay.
And I was so worried. So I got to the top of the ladder and I just blanked out and fell.
Ooh.
And and I was so lucky because in that moment, I must have a strong spirit somehow. I found my consciousness as if I was in the air, floating, watching my body fall. Now I know better to call it dissociation, but at the time it was really like a spiritual wake-up call. Yeah. And I felt completely loved. And it was the sense of, oh my gosh, there's this much love in the universe. And I watched my body narrowly miss landing on rebar. That was for tying off lines. And I hit an old tire on the side of this water tank and bounced. And then I was back in my body. And of course, I was embarrassed because all the guys saw me fall. So I climbed back up the ladder and sold the lobsters.
Oh my God.
In that,
Wow.
But in that second, I was like, oh my gosh, there's a world of spirit I need to know more about. And I want to be able to feel this much love in my body. It was really like a spiritual wake-up call.
Yep.
And that led me to Berkeley, California, where I got an amazing trainings in body-centered psychology. I started out in a Sufi-based meditation school that was for visualization and meditation, and it totally healed my worry brain. And we went back and looked at family of origin patterns. We looked at energy patterns, and my brain started to settle. And then I was in a 4-year training called Healing Ourselves that did neo-Reichian, bioenergetic, group process, men's work, women's work. And I got to see in action what it is to heal the emotions and how powerful the emotions are as a creative source for really for thriving. And how do you deal with conflict with others? And we danced as well. So there was the let's embody, let's live, let's dance. And then I started doing contact improv and improv performance with Ruth Zipporah. And it was these improvisation that gave the body repatterning. That's when I found the work of Bonnie Bainbridge Cohen, which is where I developed the infant developmental skills. And somehow through that personal inquiry, this was 4 years of deep inquiry and practice. And also I ended up teaching at the meditation school. So I got to see how you apply tools. And I've always been a big believer in give people the tools and they know how to heal. Yeah. Give them the support and give them the tools. And so I was doing all that. And I think that was my start. So I went from this totally shock, trauma, early, 20s into my mid-20s where I actually created the first somatic psychology degree in the country through Antioch University. So I got my bachelor's in somatic psychology and I volunteered at Children's Hospital to work in the infant trauma units. And I had good supervision and I started a practice. And I've been doing it ever since.
It's so cool.
And so it felt like a life calling, but it was really from my own healing. I had no thought of, I want to be a therapist. And it was like, my life is messed up. And, I better do something about it.
Yeah, exactly. That's similar to me. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So much experience. And now, you work with infants to, old age here.
Yeah.
And I think we've identified, just before the call, we talked about attachment, and we also talked about the body briefly. And it seems like attachment and embodiment are two really crucial parts, not only of our healing, but of our wellness in life.
And I'm glad you're focusing on wellness.
Yeah. Will you kind of talk about attachment, maybe big picture, how you see it and why it's so important, and then we can maybe get into some of the nuts and bolts.
Yeah, it was, I started my understanding personally of my own attachment struggle during those years in California when I read Chilton Pearce's book, The Magical Child. And in it, he talks so much about when there's healthy bonding and attachment. And I started to get really furious. And I realized I was born premature and in an incubator. I knew the story of it, but I never had the body felt sense of it. And all of a sudden I was mad. And I realized I was mad because I was separated from my mom. And that awareness started on a whole journey of really trying to solve the riddle of my own earliest imprinting. And in that process, I became really, curious about all of us. How do we connect? How do we feel safe and bonded? And so the body and the psyche and the soul really come together precognitively. It's that time frame where you might think of it soul into body. You might think of it as first impressions of, is the world safe? Will I survive? Will I survive in relationship? And that Freud used to say, first and foremost, the ego is a body ego. And so you think of the body experiences that an infant is trying to make meaning of. I studied with Lars Short, who's a Buddhist Lama for a number of years. He has Grace Essence Fellowship. And I was asking him, what's the difference between humans and animals? And he says, we humans have to make meaning. And it wasn't until I ran my clinic and I started working with a lot of 4-year-olds that I started to realize that infants make up identity beliefs. And they do it to help them regulate the discomfort of, we would talk about the nervous system arousal. So say you have a baby who is crying, and the mother comes or the father comes and the baby settles. Well, they get the message that I can call out for help, I get help, and I can relax in the connection with another.
Yeah.
When that's interrupted, a baby will call out, and then they'll call out more, and they'll get mad, and they'll start to, flail. By then, they've got so much inner hyperstimulation. They might be cold, they might be hungry, they might be lonely. All of those are needs an infant has that they can't fix by themselves.
Yeah.
And so they call for help. And if no help comes, they can go from a hyper arousal to a depression. So there is a thing, I call it infant depression. And what can also happen is that can be the moment where they kind of zone out.
Yeah, they kind of become and on the outside it might look like a good baby. Oh, they never cry, they never fuss, they're just sitting there.
Exactly, yeah. But they're really dissociated.
Yeah.
And they're not really getting nourished. And a mom can feel that usually. Now, an overwhelmed mom, it's going to be a little hard to attach to an overwhelmed mom.
Yeah.
Because she's so busy. Yeah. And so a baby can learn, okay, I meet my own needs, or I better not depend on anybody. Yeah. So all those little experiences that, mothers don't have to be perfect. You just have to repair.
Yeah.
And that's the key about attachment. It's not perfection. It's the ability to repair an interruption.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so just knowing about the body and how it works, there's arousal, There's freeze response, fight, flight, freeze. And there's also dissociation, which can be like the worst kind. Well, it's not the worst kind, but it's if there's somatic geeks watching this call, the nervous system, it has the social branch, it has the sympathetic, which is the movement side, the parasympathetic, which is the rest and digest. So we have recreational excitement, we have the ability to digest and play, and that's all wonderful. Or, rest. So we've got play and we've got rest. And then we've got also social safety and contact.
Yeah.
And so when all of that is available or gets repaired if it's interrupted, our nervous system builds a template of easy recovery. And you'll hear the word resiliency so often. In therapy, I want my clients to thrive. I don't want them just to get over the difficulty, but actually learn to thrive. Mm-hmm. And that's what I'm looking for is, can they thrive?
Yeah.
And you do that with a relaxed body.
Right. And a nervous system that's intact, easy recovery, right?
Yeah. And so if you can go all the way back to your own infancy as a grown-up and restabilize and interrupt, and I call it neuroplasticity, applied neuroplasticity.
Yep.
You literally get to a place in the brain that tolerates the discomfort of the sensation, has a context so that you don't re-traumatize or go back into shock, and you let the wave of shock pass, and you realize you survived. Mm-hmm. And the more you do that without becoming the disruption, without becoming it's reaction. If you don't become the reaction, then you're available for conscious action. And that's a different thing.
Yeah, I like that.
Is this making sense, what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's totally making sense. And okay. I'm referencing a lot of different people in my head, from Stephen Porges to Dan Siegel and some of the neuroscience work that I've studied a little bit. And so it's just cool to hear you weave all that in your own way.
Yeah. And what I like I have to say that movement, there's a lot of therapies with neuroscience and everything where you track everything and you become aware of your sensations and you notice what you're doing, but they don't often use the movement, which actually reinforms the body-mind. Mm. And that's one of the keys of, I call my work engaged somatics, but I really want to encourage the understanding of how movement, especially if you know about infant development, it's the movement that's informing the brain. And so for recovery, we don't just want to sit and track ourselves, because that's almost like we're still watching from a nervous system perspective. Whereas there's a different quality where through movement, you're actually being in a different way. Mm. I have a lot of actual meditation teachers come to me, and they've for years done sort of body awareness meditation, but they're still watching themselves.
Right, they're still sitting still, watching themselves.
Yeah, and they think they're present. And they are, to a degree. It's good work, definitely. Yeah. But there's one more layer, which is the alive sort of spontaneity.
And so are you saying, I mean, I'm really appreciating what you're saying, because you're saying we can sit and track our inner life and be, and kind of, quote, self-regulate, if you want to call it that.
Right.
But there's something else, like another step that could be added on that's equally or more powerful, which is this movement inside of self-awareness in the body. Is that what you're saying?
It is what I'm saying. Yeah.
So can you give me a concrete example of maybe an adult who is sitting there and they're doing the self-awareness, self-regulation thing, but maybe adding this in would have them gain what? Like, what's in it for them if they do it?
Yeah. A simple way, I have a free PDF download on my website called The Satisfaction Cycle. And that's all about the basic movement actions an infant uses to get its needs met. Like when an infant is
grab thing that you taught me at that course I was in. Yep.
Yeah, it's the reach, take, hold, pull. And it's just a little movement cycle that you can use anytime. And the first movement is actually an internal balance of tissue tone. Like I'm not hypertone and all revved up, and I'm not embraced, and I'm not collapsed and lethargic. So you lie on the floor and you go back and forth until you feel the middle.
Can we Can we do an example? Like, let's say I'm angry, or let's say I'm triggered by someone. Like,
okay. So if you're angry, the first thing is you notice you're angry.
Yep.
And then maybe you take a breath.
Okay.
And instead of tightening up as you're angry, you actually soften a little bit.
Okay.
So there's more breathing room. And then I would say now you're aware of yourself, you're present more, and then stand up and push against the wall. So that, and you don't want the kind of push that's like bracing, but you want to push where you actually feel your hands and feet. So it's almost as if the wall's pushing back. Or you could, if you're in therapy, you could stand and push with your hands against your therapist. But it's about being able to have relational contact. So first it's physically with one's emotional charge, making more room in the body, or you could even have someone lie down on the floor and push against the floor. That's what a baby would do because they can't walk.
Yeah.
And as they push down on the floor, the body naturally extends into a reach. So for an infant, they'll have energy go out their feet, through their pelvis, and eventually the push will allow them to reach their head, and they'll start looking around. And then you become, and this is so key for couples dynamics, when we lose our reach, we're caught up in our own anger or we're withdrawn, we don't stay engaged in conflict. We might have conflict, but we're not relational. And without relational conflict, it's not going to go anywhere.
Totally.
It's going to keep going round and round. So yield, push, then there's a reach, and then an infant would take hold of something, they would pull it, and they would put it in their mouth. And then they know, oh, what is this? Oh, okay, now I know. And that helps them both the creativity of exploration of your world, plus the efficacy, the capacity of being able to actually get something.
Yeah.
And then they mouth on it and they're satisfied.
Yep. Okay. So that's the satisfaction cycle.
That's the satisfaction cycle. And adults, I have them use it all the time. Okay. Sitting in their desk at the office even.
Let's do an example of an adult partnership. So you said, okay, we gotta engage with the conflict. We gotta reach, right? Or it just kind of goes nowhere, which I agree with. So can you give us maybe a practical example where in an adult partnership, okay, we're in a fight, you and I, how do we do this? Because I have never heard this in a couple's dynamic. How would we do kind of some
healthy
kind of satisfaction cycle conflict?
Yeah. Well, the first thing is knowing you're in the game. There's
I'm
not
here,
a part
I'm
of you.
not going anywhere.
Yep. I'm not bailing on this relationship. I don't have like, I'll just find another partner. You're in. Because that means you are motivated.
Yeah.
And that motivation, then there is the sense of having I believe in emotional conflict for a very short time because emotions help refresh the body, but it has to be done safely. This is something I teach in my couples work, or I have a book, Sexuality and the Sacred, coming out next spring, and it has this process in it.
Okay.
I call it getting real. But it's basically the satisfaction cycle with an emotional charge.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And so what we would do is you and I would stand there and, if you're mad about something, I have to stay present and not become guilty and not become like waiting for my turn to get back and share my position. I have to yield, which is the first action of the satisfaction cycle.
Right.
And I have to listen for the grain of truth in what you're saying. Not all my opposition to it, nothing like that. Because if I can take in the grain of truth, and then I can say, oh my gosh, I do that, and I can tell you that, then I can also take ownership, which is accountability, which we want in our adult partner. And then I can even empathize with you because I can put myself in your shoes. Yep. It's like, whoa, I do that. And if I had that happen to me, oh my gosh. Oh, and so all of a sudden I've got some open emotional empathy for you. Mm-hmm. Now, if you're the mad guy, and you can take turns on this part because we all get mad for good reasons. Yeah. And I think anger's a healthy thing as long as it's not just raging or all the time. It's not an anger management issue.
Yeah.
But if the person who's mad, if they can get mad and like, I don't like it when that happens, blah, 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 and they can soften in just a few seconds.
Yeah.
So the angry person is learning a very important skill. They're learning that they can have a charge, they can share it, and they can't run away. Some people get mad, they dump their charge, and they walk off.
Yeah.
It's not relational.
Yeah, it's kind of blamey. Yep.
Yeah, it's blamey. Or it's just they get satisfied because they've, released their charge, but they haven't softened and opened their heart. Mm-hmm. And so the skill set of being angry and then opening your heart is a really good one. I talk about, yeah. And so with couples, I talk about fierceness and compassion. If you don't have enough fierceness, they can steal your children. And if you have too much fierceness, nobody wants to be around you. And then if you have too much compassion, it's more like sympathy where you feel guilty and everything, they'll also steal your children when you're not looking.
Yep.
There's a whole thing of having enough awareness. So 2 adults with emotions, when you can each of them open the emotional field, then they can problem solve.
Yeah.
A lot of people try to patch up a conflict without getting to the base of it.
Absolutely. It's that time of year again where we talk about the Relationship School's 9-month training. It's for you, folks, if you can handle looking at yourself in the mirror for 9 months. You're going to come out a more self-confident human being, more relationally adept, and honestly more attractive because you'll have the capacity to handle conflict well. Listen to what Steve said.
Yeah, when I came to the relationship school initially, I was in a really painful space. My marriage was challenged. My kids were young. Yeah, I was in therapy. Therapy wasn't working. I just found myself in this confused, scared place. I'd heard Jason on the podcast and felt like I'm a Marine. And just hearing Jason's voice and the way that he was talking about love just connected with me, made a lot of sense. And that was in stark contrast with the kind of therapy that I was getting. Like, this is like boot camp for love. That would be the easiest analogy I could come up with, and just say, like, having that level of structure, that level of support, that level of care, that I haven't seen replicated elsewhere. The thing I just want to share is just the level of enormous gratitude I have for my life crossing paths with Jason Gaddis in the school, and what that's meant to me on my life journey, and as a man, as a father, as a son, as a human being. Like, I wouldn't get to be the person I am today. I just can't see how that would be possible. And I'm just very, super grateful.
Okay, bam. Geez, Steve, laying it down there. Steve's training to be a level 2 relationship coach now. And the kind of dad he is, the kind of ex-partner he is, the kind of friend he is, the kind of team member he is enormously transformed. This guy is a beast. So if you want a result like Steve, then come play with us. relationshipschool.com/DPIR to apply. Remember, you got to apply, you got to interview. We'd love to see you here. Back to the podcast. Would you say that adults who struggle here and don't have the capacity to listen to each other and speak to each other without staying in it, would you say that comes from a childhood and an attachment cycle where they never really learned how, and here they are 40 and they're finally learning how? Is that true? Or?
I would say it is true. Mm-hmm. And I would say that no matter how much inner work you've done, when you get with your intimate partner, it's going to bring up your attachment dynamics like it never has before.
Big time.
And that you can count on that as a blessing if you work it through.
Agreed.
Yeah. And so someone who learned, there's ambivalent attachment, there's anxious attachment, there's when it's disorganized, there's too much chaos, there can be controlling caregiving, there can be controlling punitive, there's even avoidant attachment. And those are all sort of labels or ways to look at a relational style that was very often developed in infancy or early childhood. And if you can learn your own style and start to work with it, you can develop secure adult attachment.
Yep, I totally agree. Yep, see that every day. So cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's
cool.
like we have to grow ourselves up in the context of relationship, right?
Yeah, that's a good way to say it. Because it can't happen until the pressure's there. And one thing may be useful to people, I always ask the question, is your home breathing? Which means, can you be at home with your partner and not track them all the time or not avoid them or just like relax.
Yeah.
And if you can't relax at home, you are just not going to make it.
Yeah. You're going to get burned
in
out
partnership.
eventually.
Yeah. It's too much work.
Yep. Yeah. So how, I'm so curious, like with the back to the movement stuff for a minute.
Yeah.
Cause it's such a pivotal part of your work. Do you think it's important that couples move during conflict, stay in proximity, not across from the room, look each other in the eyes, maybe even do some physical, either pushing or hand on leg, or do you encourage that kind of stuff, or what do you recommend there?
I would say prior to when not in conflict, that you have more movement things you can do that aren't just about sex. Because lots of times it's just, where do you move together in sexuality? But I often encourage couples to wrestle. Yeah. So, you get down on all fours, lean into each other. Yep. Usually the guy's bigger than the woman or, who's ever the bigger one. They're down on all fours. And the other one can climb on their back and squish them. Yeah. And it's just this ability to sort of play and squish and wrestle a little bit.
I love it.
That gives you, more liveliness, because we don't have liveliness.
Yeah, my wife was, case in point, kind of shaking me yesterday in a playful way.
Yeah.
Because I was all serious and kind of in myself, and she was just like, come on. Like,
right, where's my
and I could feel myself resisting, right? Like, I don't want to. I want to stay stuck where I am.
Yeah. Yeah. There's also tools. I think it takes a little while to get used to the body actually being spontaneous enough. And I'm not talking about people who can't contain, because I think part of growing oneself up is the ability to contain energy and to express it. Yeah. And sometimes you have to contain a little bit of a charge in order to stay present and see what's really going on. So you're not reacting right away. Yeah. But if you shut down and don't move, and like you said, I just want to stay stuck, even being able to say that is an engagement. Yep. Like, I just want to stay stuck. Don't shake me. Right. Right. But it can be playful.
Yeah. And I'm owning what's going on and being congruent.
Yeah. 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 So these are but first and foremost, we're still animals, even though we have our high brains. And our animals need to move and curl up and roll around and, stay in our bodies. And we live in a culture that many people sit for hours watching a computer screen. Oh, yeah. And those guys or girls, whoever it is, need a transition time before they try to relate, especially someone coming home from the office to the household. Say mom's been home with a bunch of kids, has been moving around all day, chasing the kids in a way. The guy needs to re-inhabit the movement space before all of a sudden, I really encourage couples to look at how they transition back into each other's company. Because if mom is busy, all of a sudden dad's here and thank God there's another adult, she just wants to download on him. and if he hasn't moved and stretched and rolled around on the floor a little, he's not very available. He's still trying to get his eyes back from looking at a screen.
Yep. Yeah, and he might need some decompression or some physical stuff or something else.
And they might just need some contact before it's all talk, talk, talk.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
Did that answer your question?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. What do you think of if we start to? I'm just curious to get your thoughts on this. If we get a little myopic about the attachment conversation as, let's say, two personal growth development oriented couples,
yeah,
are like really
that's
into it, and then it starts to become like, hey, we're safe all the time, and then maybe it gets a little domesticated. And I'm just curious, does that happen? Do you see that, and what can we do to?
So you're talking about how do we keep recreating our relationship in a way?
Okay.
Is that what you're saying? Like, okay, we've made it into a safety zone together. We're kind of okay. Or are you saying more that people who get sort of too groovy or, obsessed with their attachment style, they're too process oriented?
Yeah, I'm more talking about that because I think when we do get to security, I think it sort of is self-evident and we can expand and express and do some really cool stuff. So I'm more talking about the obsession with your attachment style is this and my attachment style is that.
Yeah. That's, excuse my language, but it gets a little like that's bullshit after a while.
Okay.
It's a way of labeling. It's a way of actually staying in control. And one of the things of coupleness is how to navigate control dynamics and to not have to control the situation. And so if you're always reverting to the processing, you can drain the life out of a relationship.
Oh,
yeah. It's no fun anymore.
Yeah.
And so what about instead, playing tennis or running around the block or
wrestling?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so sometimes, giving a label to something helps people feel safer.
Yeah.
But then if they use it as a weapon, it's like you don't want to weaponize your skills.
Yeah, totally.
Because that just shows that there's actually conflict going on. And, we do use each other to self-regulate, but ultimately you have to be able to self-adult secure attach so that you have two adults meeting up.
Yep.
And so, yeah.
Yeah, cool. And Annie, what do you think about couples who are really struggling and it's really an attachment dynamic. It's clear as day. Let's say you're working with this couple and they just haven't quite figured it out yet. But one of them gets convinced that they want to open up the marriage and it's...
I say, I don't work with people who want to do that.
Okay. And why not? So give us your take on this.
I'm kind of, I will. I say that a bit playfully, but when people come to me for couples work, I invest in their well-being. And I say to them, don't even think about leaving your relationship for 6 months. I want to see if you can actually stay in the container of the discomfort.
Yeah.
Because it's so easy, especially in our culture, where we don't have the social mores in the same way. And with divorce being so easy, I always point out right away, what's the cost of a divorce? What's going to be the cost of a divorce?
Yeah, it's about $25,000 on average in the States.
Yeah, plus all the headache and
costs.
The back and forth of schlepping kids here and there and all that stuff.
Oh, yeah.
It's like if you can work it out, this person could be your greatest ally. And so that's always my primary goal. There's certain people, I guess, it's just not right for them. But I've had the experience in my own life of two sort of failed relationships where I tried my best and I worked really hard. And then with my marriage of having someone who actually learned how to go through conflict with me, and I learned with him. And oh my gosh, the spirituality, we were having natural tantric experiences because there was so much trust.
Mm-hmm.
And that's my, it may be a lofty goal, but that's what I wish for people. Totally. Is that your partner can be your best friend. You can really have this sense of depth. And it's like knowing each other's soul. So I don't think with polyamory, the people who have come to me out of polyamory relationships for clinical work have often been so traumatized by it without even knowing it.
Yeah, it gets very complicated very quick.
And it can have an almost cult-like feeling.
Mm-hmm.
There can be dissociation. And, I'm not wise enough to say it's not good for everybody. I just know in intact families and children, and I kind of look at the bigger picture and fitting into this culture. We're not a culture like my friend Zaitodi, who's a Maasai elder in Africa. Their culture, he has 4 wives.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, and
right,
they
that's
all
the culture.
That's the culture, but we're not in that culture.
Yeah.
And that's a real key. And you're not going to change the culture itself by becoming polyamorous.
Yeah. That's great. Just because we have some listeners who that's on the table, right? They're like, well, if I just open this up, maybe, and it's kind of cool now and it's kind of okay. So maybe that'll be better.
Right. But I would say before you do that, you've already invested something.
Yeah. See if you can double down.
Double down and get help, because if you don't have the tools, it's like having an escape door.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally.
Yeah.
So just switching gears, as we start to wind down, I've got so many questions for you, but I want to try to fit a few more in.
Yeah. I have to say one quick thing.
Yeah.
I used to, I'm certified as a tantra teacher. I used to teach the tantric work, which is part of the, healthy sexuality and spirituality. But I found if people didn't do their attachment work, their tantra work would sort of blow them out. And it would cause people to disrupt families, and it produced an endocrine charge that wasn't grounded.
Wow, interesting.
And sexuality can be addictive because it runs through the endocrine system. And I'd rather have people figure conflict out and figure out their own embodiment and attachment, and then explore the tantric practices.
It's almost like you got to get ready for that.
Yeah, you got to get ready. In fact, my next book is called Relationship Ready.
Okay.
It's how you do what it takes to be ready.
Yeah, that's great.
So what are your questions?
That's awesome. Well, I like to ask a lot of my guests this because it's a sticking point for a lot of people, which is one person's in the relationship, wants to do the work, wants to work on it, and the other person does not. How do you coach people through that type of dynamic? What do you recommend?
Well, first I have to put on my little detective hat and see if the person who's really wanting to work on the relationship is obsessive or invasive.
Mm-hmm.
Because if they're wanting to work on the relationship, but they actually don't understand how they're damaging the relationship just by their lack of awareness, the other person isn't going to want to try.
Right.
So I have to really assess a lot. And then I have to find out what's the fear of working on it. Like maybe they have worked on it, or maybe, it's a childhood wound or something like that. And then I have to get results right away for them. Meaning we have to hook up enough in our therapeutic work that they start to feel changes. Because you can pay a therapist a lot of money and just kind of not experience change.
Absolutely. That's probably the norm.
Yeah. And I don't want that for people. So what I do is I highlight what's the cost if you don't work on it. And then I look at, well, what have you experienced as working on it already? And if if you're working on your relationship all the time and there's no pleasure, that's not a relationship. Yeah. That's an effort. And sometimes people have to learn how not to work on it. Yeah. That's really the issue.
Yeah. What does that mean exactly?
Well, that means that the person wanting to work on it might be the anxiously attached one that's always looking to their partner for validation or for reasons to feel anxious or to criticize them. And in fact, their partner's actually good enough.
Yeah.
And if they could just relax and go see a movie together or, walk around the block or...
Yeah.
It makes, it's not maybe so much work. Now, I want to say, we live in nuclear families and I think the closed up nuclear family household is hard.
Yeah.
Getting in your car, having to drive everywhere, parents with kids, they have to drive everywhere. It does create stress.
Stress. Yep.
Yeah.
Especially if both parties are working and, kids, their activities and all that shit.
Yeah. So how to simplify life is a real key too.
How do you, when you hear the terms interactive regulation or co-regulation in using the nervous system and adult attachment stuff, like what is your lingo for that, and what is your experience of that in terms of it being helpful for couples?
I have mixed feelings.
Okay.
I've heard, that yes, we're co-regulating, and I want to say yes, because sometimes it's up to you to regulate yourself, not depend on your partner to produce the regulation. When there's a very young self, that one needs the other person to be the adult. And that's why doing a kind of therapy that allows you to regress and be young can be helpful. But if you're always relying on your partner to create the regulation, that can be a problem. And then the end part of all that is you're in the same field. So if one of you's dysregulated, the other's going to feel it. And so learning to look and to be connected and to feel safe and to smile at each other. I'm a pre and perinatal psychologist as well. And in that work, you're really working with what we call healthy amygdala eyes. And that's the smiling eyes that help somebody feel reassured. And so I appreciate and encourage the work where if a couple's out socially, they can look to each other. Oh, how you doing over there? They can know that, there's someone that gets me who's here in the room, especially if one of the parties has social anxiety. They can really help regulate with each other. And knowing each other's, how is it? You know each other's wounds. You don't tromp on them, but you also don't exploit them. Mm-hmm. You don't let the wounds become a banner that then gets in the way of authenticity.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. So both and for you, and that makes sense. We need to be able to regulate ourselves, and there's an interactive regulatory experience going on all the time if we live together, because I feel what you're going through, and I may as well lend a hand when I can and look out for your, well-being.
Right.
And,
And there's another piece to that, though. I also need to be able to not lend a hand. I need to be able to stay inside my own hula hoop. So sometimes I'll have couples literally each get a big hula hoop, take it home, and sit inside it and, read a book on the couch, have your partner, maybe they're doing a little craft or something, but you're in the same room and you're learning to regulate yourself in proximity to other. And that's key as well.
Yeah, another skill that we can develop in a partnership.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So you have a big palette.
Yeah, but I like it. I'm kind of hearing three different things there, which is cool. Again, it's all going to help us be stronger, so I may as well learn these things.
Well, if you don't, they're going to come after you in their own way. You're going to have more struggles, and anything you learn in your couple intimacy can actually help you in a work team. And what you don't want is to get your intimacy outside of the home and your struggle inside of the home.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a bummer, because then you're coming home and you don't want to come home because it's like the home is the place where you feel the stress.
Yeah, and that's why the house has to breathe.
Has to breathe, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, very cool. Annie, as we wind down, I want to ask where people can find you, but before I've got a couple more questions. So
I love your questions, Jason.
Cool.
It's good to jam on here.
Oh yeah, it's so awesome hearing your experience. So just final parting words, I guess, for the couple out there that's listening, or the individual that's maybe single. What would you say? Just, hey, I want a secure kind of adult attached, strong relationship, what would you say to them?
I would say go for it. I would say if that's what you want, you start, hanging out with people who want the same thing.
Yeah.
And get the tools.
Mm-hmm.
I could not have been in the place I am now without going through some deep growth, some challenges, it's really body, mind, spirit that we want to continue to refresh and renew and learn.
Yeah.
And that the tools are out there.
Oh, yeah.
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 And I would say, that's why, the book Relationship Ready, it's like I really thought through, what did I do that allowed me to show up in my marriage?
Mm-hmm.
And I had to deconstruct. I had to do family of origin work, where I let go a loyalty to my own growing up family's dysfunction. And I had a pretty functional family.
Right.
But there were just ways that I needed to explore.
Mm-hmm.
So there are sort of, you can sort of do a deep dive and then come out the other side.
I'm hearing,
and say, "Oh, I'm much more adult now."
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Me too. Wow. Yeah. When I first met you, I think I was like one of those infants you worked with.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Bless your heart.
Yeah. So you also mentioned, quick side question, I'm sneaking in. You mentioned surround yourself with people that want the same thing. So how important is it that we have allies on our journey that support our growing self, not our kind of stagnant self?
It's essential.
Yeah.
It's
right?
essential. Yeah. That is the social field, and that is part of the healthy regulating nervous system. And I have to say, there's some kinds of allies that aren't really allies. They're always challenging and breaking you down.
Yeah.
And I've seen that where people are put into shock, and then relationally, what they're doing is criticizing everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, what's wrong here? Oh, how can I be the good brother and show you where you're off base? And they don't realize that they're pushing away relationship.
Mm.
So the right kind of ally who can both challenge and relax, and also hold the friendship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
But what's so important is you don't choose non-sober allies.
What does that mean?
Whether that means whether you choose allies who have, they befriend your addictions, whether it's an addiction to drama, or it's an addiction to substances, or it's an addiction to anxiety, or an addiction to being right.
Yeah.
We live in a world that's complex and fortunately peopled with a lot of different people.
Oh, yeah.
So we want to be we don't want to be politically correct where we have no discernment. We don't want to be overly inclusive, but it's like, okay, where your feet on the earth,
Mm-hmm.
where do you stand? How is there enough people you can share that with? And how, especially during this political time, not to polarize. People are getting so drawn into drama that those are not allies.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Great. Last question. I ask every guest. One of our missions is to reach 1 million young people.
Oh, hooray.
With tools, right? And so we're chipping away at that. And I always ask, if I were to speak in front of 1,000 high school students and you could whisper one thing about relationships that you would want me to impart to them, what would you have me say to them?
I would say, you are worth it. That relationship matters, and finding the grit and love of yourself so that you're worthy of a good partnership, and you're worthy of not being put down. You're worthy of your expression, and you're going to mess up. So enjoy the ride, get help when you need it, and, keep going.
Yeah. Sweet. Cool.
Yeah.
Thanks, Annie. Where can people find out about you and your books and your work?
The simplest way is my website, anniebrooke.com. And there's a shop page that has all my books. I have a free PDF library. I have an ebook on attachment, and I have ebooks on what men want from women, what women want from men, just some of the myths that we grow up with. And also, I think the key here for me is the tools. So my books are usually written in a pretty simple style, but they cause you to reflect and to do embodiment, one on adoption. And what I'm excited about now is I've started offering online courses, and I also have in-person trainings. And my biggest dream is that more and more therapists get an embodied skill set that is not just the body stuff, but it's the relational stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And that they become relational therapists in a way that serves clients.
Yeah. Amen.
That they have the training. Yeah. But share the tools.
Yep. Cool. So again, AnnieBrook.com. That's
AnnieBrook.com.
ANNIEBROOK. And we'll put that in the show notes.
Great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you got it. And guys, if you ever get to see Annie in person or work with her, it's really a treat. And also, I don't know if you have any YouTube videos of you working with people or infants. It's pretty fun to watch you do that.
Okay. Yeah, I do have some. I'm in the process of putting some more up as well. And occasionally, if you're in Boulder and you have an infant, or during my trainings, I offer free sessions to parents so that I can show therapists how you work with babies.
Yeah, killer.
So you could even ask for that.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, Jason, thank you for all that you do and, walking your talk.
Yeah, you got it. Thanks for being a teacher along the way.
You bet.
Okay, wow. Make sure you go check out Annie Brook, okay? AnnieBrook.com. And see if you can find a YouTube video of her working with an infant. It's so cool. Check out her books. Check out her trainings. There's a lot of wisdom in this woman. So I had a lot of takeaways. I thought it was pretty cool what she said about the satisfaction cycle, about staying in the marriage and not sort of saying, oh, it's hard, let's open it up. I appreciate anyone who's saying, let's stay on the fire until we're like in a good place, and then maybe we talk about stuff like that. Yeah, so here's your action step. Okay, there's a number of things you could do with this episode. But I think for me, one of the big takeaways was this satisfaction cycle. So I hope you wrote that down. I'm going to quickly just say it again. It's yield, push, reach, take hold, pull, taste. See if you can write that down. All right. Now, with any kind of self-awareness practice you have, sitting meditation, let's call it, or you just get triggered and you're just closing your eyes and you're breathing into your experience, I like what she added there, which is movement. And that's part of the satisfaction cycle. There's like a reach or a push or a take hold, right? Or a pull. There's something about, see if you can feel into your body and see what the impulse is. And so we talked about anger as an example, remember? And she was like, okay, close your eyes, feel it. And it's not maybe enough to just feel it. See if you can allow your body to move with that emotional experience. So for anger, it might be you push on the ground as you're sitting there, or you're lying down, like she said, and you push to the left, or you push to the right with your foot, or you get up and you push a wall. But you got to be connected to yourself, your feet, your root as you push. Otherwise, it's kind of this disconnected, dissociated kind of reactivity. So make sure whatever you're doing in that satisfaction cycle as you be with your experience, allow yourself to move, because that's what the satisfaction cycle is. It's about movement. It's what a little baby does. Okay, yield, accept, push. Okay, I'm going to push a little bit. I'm going to reach for something. I'm going to grab it. I'm going to pull it toward me. I'm going to experience it. All right, play with that and just see how that impacts your ability to stay with your experience. Okay. Yeah, awesome. All right. Okay, as you know, we're taking applications for Deeper, which starts in late January, early February. It's a 9-month rigorous deep dive into the art of being yourself in the context of relationships. Okay, so it's a relationship course for sure. You're going to learn all kinds of relationship tools, but the primary outcome, it seems like, from what my students keep saying, is self-confidence goes up, self-worth goes up, and I feel better in my own skin. Who doesn't want that? So it takes training and work to get there. You can't just think about it. You can't just listen to a podcast and get there, right? You need to lift the weights. So if you want to come train with us, relationshipschool.com/DPIR, and you can apply. We interview everybody that goes through our training. So make sure you check that out. And thanks again for subscribing here and sharing this episode with someone you care about. All right. Thanks, folks. Talk soon. Hey, thanks so much for listening. Relationship School fans and Smart Couple listeners, please subscribe to this YouTube channel, all right? Do us a favor, subscribe, share one of these videos with a friend, all right? We want to help the planet get their act together around relationships, and you are one of them, so thank you.